Cold metal pressed against David Cross's face as consciousness slowly returned to him. The taste of blood filled his mouth and his head pounded like a war drum. He tried to move, but thick restraints held his arms and legs to what felt like a medical table. Light flooded his vision as something clicked above him. Strange shapes moved in the brightness, tall figures with pale blue skin that seemed to glow from within. Their faces were longer than human faces, with large, dark eyes that held an intelligence David had never seen before. "The creature awakens," one of them said in perfect English, though the voice carried musical tones that no human throat could make. Fascinating that it survived the crash with so little damage. David blinked hard, trying to focus. The room around him looked like a medical bay, but everything was too clean, too smooth. White walls curved seamlessly into the ceiling and floor. No corners anywhere. The air smelled like flowers mixed with electricity. "Where am I?" David's voice came out as a croak. "You are in our care," the same alien replied. Its skin pattern shifted from pale blue to deeper shades of purple as it spoke. "I am Captain Rill of the Etherian Defense Corps. Your vessel violated our territorial boundaries." David remembered now. His reconnaissance ship had been mapping the outer rim when these aliens, Etherians, had appeared from nowhere. Their weapons had torn through his shields like paper. He was lucky to be alive. "My crew?" David asked. "You were alone," Captain Rill said. "Which puzzles us. Why would your species send a single individual into unknown space?" David said nothing. The mission had been classified, a deep probe to gather intelligence on potential threats. He was not about to explain human military strategy to his captors. Captain Rill moved closer and David got his first clear look at an Etherian. The alien stood nearly 8 feet tall with skin that rippled with colors like aurora lights. Its hands had 6 fingers, each tipped with what looked like crystal claws. Most striking were the patterns that flowed across its skin, geometric shapes that pulsed and shifted like living tattoos. "Your biology is similar to ours in many ways," Captain Rill continued. "But these markings on your skin confuse our medical teams." The alien gestured toward David's exposed arms. David looked down at his tattoos. They covered his arms from wrist to shoulder, intricate designs he had earned through years of military service. Each one told a story of battles fought and friends lost. The geometric patterns were mixed with symbols from a dozen different human cultures. Decorative scarification, Captain Rill mused. But permanent. Why would you damage your skin in such a way? "They are not damaged," David said quietly. 2 more Etherians entered the room. Their skin patterns flickered rapidly as they communicated in what looked like living light shows. David watched in fascination as colors raced across their bodies like neural networks made visible. "This is Scholar Yen and Medical Technician Voss," Captain Rill explained. "They have been studying your markings since you arrived." Scholar Yen approached with something that looked like a crystal magnifying glass. Its skin glowed brighter as it examined David's tattoos up close. "The precision is remarkable," it said. "Each line perfectly straight, each curve mathematically exact. But the symbols, they are unlike anything in our databases. Perhaps they indicate rank," Medical Technician Voss suggested. "Or tribal affiliation?" "No," Scholar Yen said. "The patterns are too complex. See how they interconnect? This one flows into that one, and that connects to this cluster here. It is almost like a language." David kept his expression neutral even as his heart raced. If they figured out what the tattoos really meant, it could compromise human military operations across the galaxy. Each symbol did tell a story, but not the kind these aliens might expect. "Can you read them?" Captain Rill asked David directly. "They are personal," David replied. "Nothing that would interest you." "On the contrary," Scholar Yen said, its skin now pulsing with excited yellow patterns. "We find human culture fascinating. Your species appears to be unique in many ways." Captain Rill's skin darkened to deep blue. "Scholar Yen, remember that this creature is a potential hostile. Do not let curiosity override caution." "Of course, Captain." Scholar Yen stepped back but continued staring at David's arms. "Still, I would very much like to understand these markings. The geometric precision suggests mathematical knowledge, but the organic flow indicates artistic sensibility. A fascinating combination." David watched as the 3 aliens discussed him like he was a museum exhibit. Their skin patterns changed constantly as they talked, creating a light show that was both beautiful and alien. He wondered if they even realized they were doing it. "Perhaps we should consult Elder Neth," medical technician Voss suggested. The archives contain knowledge of many ancient cultures. Elder Neth has not left the deep archives in 40 years, Captain Rill replied. I doubt these crude markings warrant disturbing such a respected scholar. Crude? Scholar Yen's patterns flashed brighter. Captain, look at this symbol here. It pointed to a complex design on David's forearm. The mathematical precision required to create such perfect curves by hand would take years of training. And this one connects to 3 others through what appears to be a deliberate pattern. David glanced at the symbol Scholar Yen had indicated. It was one of his oldest tattoos, earned during the campaign at Rigel Station. The curves the alien admired so much were actually stylized flames, humanity's symbol for their war against the cosmic entities they called harbingers. We should photograph all the markings, Captain Rill decided. Create a complete record for study. Excellent idea, Scholar Yen agreed. I will begin cross-referencing the symbols with our historical databases. If these markings have meaning, we will discover it. As the aliens busied themselves with their equipment, David closed his eyes and tried not to think about what would happen if they succeeded. His tattoos were more than decorations or even military honors. They were a record of humanity's greatest secret, the war that had raged in the darkness between stars for thousands of years. The war against gods. Medical technician Voss began scanning David's arms with devices that hummed and clicked. Each tattoo glowed briefly under the alien sensors, and David wondered what secrets the machines might reveal. Fascinating, Scholar Yen muttered, studying the readouts. The ink contains trace elements I have never seen before, and the depth. These markings go much deeper into the skin than normal decorative scarification. David remained silent. There was nothing he could say that would not make things worse. He could only hope that the aliens would see his tattoos as primitive human art rather than what they truly were, a soldier's record of battles fought against beings that most species in the galaxy still worshipped as gods. Deep beneath the Etherian capital city, ancient stone corridors stretched into darkness. Elder Neth moved slowly through the underground archives, his aged form casting long shadows in the pale light. His skin had lost much of its color over the centuries, showing only faint traces of the brilliant patterns that marked younger Etherians. The call had come 3 days ago, an urgent summons from Captain Rill about mysterious symbols found on a captured alien. Neth had ignored the first 2 messages. At nearly 1,000 years old, he had little patience for the curiosities of younger generations. But the 3rd message had included images that made his ancient blood run cold. Neth paused before a massive stone door carved with warnings in the old script. Few Etherians could read the ancient language anymore, but the message was clear. Beyond this threshold lay knowledge that was better left buried. Knowledge from the dark epochs when their people had lived in fear and shadow. The door recognized Neth's biosignature and ground open with a sound like breaking bones. Inside, crystal storage devices lined the walls from floor to ceiling. Each one contained memories and records from times the modern Etherian Council preferred to forget. Neth approached a particular section marked with symbols that hurt to look at directly. The void scripts, writing systems used by beings that existed partially outside normal reality. Studying them was dangerous. Many scholars had lost their minds trying to decode their meanings. But the images Captain Rill had sent showed symbols that were similar to the void scripts, yet different in crucial ways. Where the ancient writing spoke of worship and submission, these new markings carried undertones of something else entirely. Computer, display the human prisoner images, Neth commanded. His voice echoed strangely in the crystal-lined chamber. Holographic projections filled the air around him, showing every angle of the alien's marked skin. Neth studied each symbol with the patience of centuries. The mathematical precision was remarkable, each line and curve placed with deliberate intent. But it was the combinations that made his ancient heart race. These symbols did not worship the beings from beyond. They proclaimed victory over them. Impossible, Neth whispered to himself. No species has ever successfully resisted the harbingers. He activated one of the ancient crystal storage devices. Pain shot through his skull as memories not his own flooded his mind. Visions of the dark epochs when cosmic entities had ruled vast sections of the galaxy. The Etherians had been fortunate. Their harbinger had been relatively benevolent, sharing knowledge in exchange for obedience. But other species had not been so lucky. Some had been enslaved completely. Others had been used as experimental subjects. A few had simply been consumed for their life energy. And then, according to the oldest records, something had changed. The harbingers had begun to disappear. One by one, their cosmic voices had fallen silent. The few survivors spoke of fire carriers, beings who somehow possessed weapons capable of harming entities that existed partially outside reality. Most Etherians believed these were myths, tales invented to explain the end of the dark epochs. But Neth had spent centuries studying the evidence, and he knew the truth. Something had indeed hunted the harbingers to near extinction. He examined another tattoo from the human prisoner, a complex spiral surrounded by geometric flames. Neth's hands trembled as he recognized the pattern. It matched descriptions from the very oldest archives. Descriptions of weapons that burned with impossible fire. The fire carriers, he breathed. They were real. Neth activated his communication device with shaking hands. Captain Rill's image appeared in the crystal chamber, his skin pattern showing obvious irritation. Elder Neth, I was beginning to think you had decided not to respond to our request. Captain, I need you to answer a question with complete honesty, Neth said. This human prisoner, has he demonstrated any unusual capabilities? Any technology you do not understand? Captain Rill's pattern shifted to confusion. His ship was primitive by our standards. Crude fusion drive, simple energy weapons, nothing that should have posed a threat to our patrol vessels. Yet you captured him. Yes, but only because he was alone and outnumbered 50-1. Why do you ask? Neth was quiet for a long moment, studying the tattoo images again. Captain, I believe this human belongs to the species responsible for ending the dark epochs. Captain Rill's skin flashed bright white, the Etherian equivalent of shocked laughter. Elder Neth, with respect, the fire carriers are legend. Stories our ancestors told to explain natural phenomena. Look at this symbol, Neth said, highlighting one of the tattoos. And this one? They are not decorative, Captain. They are a written record. Each marking documents a specific battle against beings we once worshipped as gods. The silence stretched between them. Finally, Captain Rill spoke. Even if your interpretation is correct, the implications would be devastating to our entire understanding of history, Neth finished. Yes, our golden age of enlightenment, our philosophical renaissance, our freedom to develop our own culture. All of it was only possible because this species eliminated our cosmic overlords. Captain Rill's skin patterns cycled through several colors before settling on deep purple. What you are suggesting would shake the foundations of Etherian society. Truth often does, Neth replied. I need access to the prisoner. I must confirm my translation. Absolutely not. The creature could be dangerous. Captain, if I am correct, then this creature belongs to the only species in the galaxy capable of killing gods. Whether he is dangerous or not is irrelevant. What matters is understanding what these markings truly mean. Neth could see Captain Rill struggling with the implications. Modern Etherians took pride in their independence, their philosophical achievements. Learning that their entire civilization existed only because another species had fought their battles for them would be humbling beyond measure. I will need to consult with the High Council, Captain Rill said finally. Do what you must, Neth replied. But do it quickly. If these humans are still fighting the old wars, then there may be harbingers still active in other sectors. We need to know what this prisoner can tell us. Captain Rill's image flickered and vanished. Neth was alone again with the ancient crystals and their terrible knowledge. He studied the tattoo images once more, tracing the flame patterns with his finger. Each symbol was beautiful in its own way, but taken together they told a story that would change everything. A story of ordinary beings who had somehow found the strength to challenge cosmic tyranny, who had carried fire against gods and emerged victorious. The question that haunted Neth was simple. If humans had been fighting this war for millennia, what did that make them? Heroes? Or something far more dangerous? His skin flickered with old patterns of fear as he considered the implications. A species that could kill gods would not be easily contained, or easily trusted. But perhaps, Neth thought as he sealed the crystal storage devices, they did not need to be contained. Perhaps they needed to be understood. The archives fell silent around him as he began the long journey back to the surface. Behind him, ancient knowledge slept in crystal tombs, waiting for the day when the galaxy would need to remember the price of freedom. That day, Neth suspected, was coming sooner than anyone realized. The translation chamber hummed with dangerous energy as Elder Neth prepared the ancient decoding matrices. Crystalline formations jutted from the walls like frozen lightning, each one inscribed with symbols that seemed to writhe when viewed directly. This room had been sealed for 300 years, its purpose too perilous for casual study. Captain Rill stood at the chamber's edge, his skin patterns betraying deep unease. "Elder, are you certain this is necessary?" The High Council expressed concerns about using forbidden translation methods. "The void scripts cannot be decoded through conventional means," Neth replied, adjusting controls that predated current Etherian technology. "If we wish to understand what these human markings truly mean, we must risk the old ways." Holographic projections of David's tattoos filled the chamber's center. Under the strange light of the translation matrices, the human symbols seemed to pulse with their own energy. Neth began the delicate process of aligning the ancient decoding crystals with specific tattoo patterns. "The risk to your mind is considerable," Captain Rill warned. "The records speak of scholars who attempted similar translations. Most lost their sanity." Neth's ancient skin flickered with resigned patterns. "At my age, Captain, sanity is a luxury I can afford to sacrifice for truth." The first matrix activated with a sound like breaking glass. Pain shot through Neth's skull as alien thoughts invaded his consciousness. For a moment he experienced reality as the Harbingers had, existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously, seeing time as a fluid concept, feeling the weight of cosmic power. But something was wrong. The symbols were not written from the Harbingers' perspective. They were written by those who opposed them. "Fascinating," Neth gasped, fighting through the neural feedback. "These markings are not worship inscriptions. They are battle records." A second matrix came online, and suddenly Neth could read the first tattoo clearly. It depicted a stellar formation he recognized, the Crimson Nebula. But the symbols described it not as a place of cosmic beauty, but as a battlefield. A place where fire carriers had laid siege to a Harbinger stronghold. "By the ancient lights," Neth whispered. "This symbol here, it represents the death of a god." Captain Rill moved closer despite his fear. "What does it say exactly?" Neth activated a third matrix, his hands trembling from the psychic strain. The translation is fragmented, but the meaning is clear. "Crimson Nebula Siege, Day 1007. Fire weapons penetrated the entity's dimensional barriers. The Devourer of Worlds fell to coordinated fusion strikes." "Impossible," Captain Rill breathed. "The Harbingers were eternal." "Immortal." "That is what they wanted us to believe," Neth replied, moving to another tattoo. This one showed a spiral galaxy with specific star systems marked. "Look at this pattern. Each marked system represents a successful campaign against cosmic entities." The fourth matrix screamed as it activated, and Neth nearly collapsed from the feedback. Blood ran from his nose as alien memories flooded his consciousness. He saw flashes of impossible battles, small human ships dancing around beings the size of moons, weapons that burned with fire that existed in 11 dimensions, soldiers who fought gods with nothing but courage and fusion bombs. "This tattoo chronicles the battle of the sunless worlds," Neth managed to say. 7 star systems where the Harbingers had extinguished all light. The humans brought artificial suns, fusion bombs large enough to reignite dead stars. Captain Rill's skin patterns had gone completely white. "How many battles are recorded here?" Neth examined tattoo after tattoo, each one revealing new horrors. "Dozens, perhaps hundreds. This human's body is a complete military history." "And Captain, the dates. According to these markings, the war has been ongoing for over 3,000 years. 3,000 years of fighting gods?" Captain Rill could barely speak. The fifth matrix activated, and Neth suddenly understood the pattern that connected all the tattoos. "Captain, these are not just battle records. They are a genealogy." This human carries the markings of his predecessors. Each generation of warriors adds their victories to the record. "You mean the tattoos are inherited?" "In a sense." "Look here." Neth pointed to a cluster of symbols on David's shoulder. These older markings use slightly different mathematical principles, techniques refined over centuries of warfare, and this phrase that appears repeatedly. Neth activated the final matrix despite the agony it caused. The translation was crystal clear now. "Carried fire against their gods." "It is not just a battle cry, Captain. It is a species creed. A promise passed down through generations." Captain Rill stared at the human symbols with new understanding. They have been protecting the galaxy for 3 millennia, protecting it from beings most species never even knew existed, Neth confirmed. Our golden age, our freedom to develop philosophy and art, all of it was possible only because humans were fighting a secret war in the darkness between stars. The translation matrices powered down, leaving both Etherians in stunned silence. The implications were staggering. Everything they believed about their history, their achievements, their place in the universe, all of it built on the sacrifices of a species they had never heard of. Elder Neth, if these translations are accurate, then we owe our entire civilization to a species we just declared hostile. Neth finished. Yes, Captain. The irony is not lost on me. Captain Rill's patterns cycled through confusion, fear, and something approaching awe. What do we do with this knowledge? We verify it, Neth said firmly. I must speak with the human directly. If these markings are accurate, he may know of threats we cannot imagine. Harbingers that still exist in distant sectors. And if the High Council refuses? Neth studied the tattoo projections one final time. Each symbol now told a clear story. Ordinary beings rising up against cosmic tyranny. Species like the Etherians free to develop their own cultures because humans had paid the price in blood and fire. Then we remind them that their philosophical principles include the pursuit of truth, Neth said. No matter how uncomfortable that truth might be. As they left the translation chamber, Captain Rill sealed the ancient room behind them. But the knowledge they had gained could not be contained so easily. The galaxy was not what they had believed. And humanity was not what they appeared to be. They were something far more dangerous and far more necessary. The question that haunted both Etherians as they made their way through the ancient corridors was simple. If humans had been fighting this war for 3,000 years, what did that make them? The galaxy's secret guardians, or its most terrifying predators. The High Council chamber stretched upward into shadows, its crystalline walls pulsing with the nervous energy of 12 elder Etherians. Their skin patterns created a chaotic light show as Captain Rill and Elder Neath presented their findings. At the chamber's center, holographic displays showed every angle of David's tattoos alongside Neth's translations. Council Speaker Thara's patterns flashed deep red, a color reserved for moments of extreme crisis. You are asking us to believe that our entire civilization exists only because an unknown species has been fighting cosmic entities in secret? I am not asking you to believe anything, Elder Neth replied calmly. I am presenting evidence. The translations are clear. These markings document 3 millennia of warfare against beings we once worshipped. Counselor Vren's skin shifted to skeptical yellow. Even if we accept your interpretation, how do we know these humans are telling the truth? Perhaps these markings are simply elaborate fiction. Captain Rill activated another holographic display. Because the evidence extends beyond the tattoos. Our deep space sensors have detected anomalies in 17 star systems over the past century. Unexplained energy signatures, gravitational disturbances, entire solar systems going dark for periods of time. Natural phenomena, Counselor Beck insisted, though his patterns betrayed uncertainty. Natural phenomena that occur in perfect synchronization with the battle dates recorded on this human skin, Neth countered. The Rigel incident, the Vega anomaly, the complete disappearance of the Centauri system for 48 hours, all of them correspond to campaigns documented in these tattoos. Council Speaker Thera's patterns dimmed as she processed the implications. If this is true, then the philosophical renaissance that defines our culture was only possible because humans eliminated our cosmic overlords, Neth finished. Yes, the entity that ruled our sector for 2 millennia, the one our ancestors called the Lightbringer, was destroyed by human fire weapons approximately 800 years ago. The silence that followed was deafening. 12 ancient Etherians struggled with a truth that threatened everything they believed about themselves. Their art, their philosophy, their scientific achievements, all built on the foundation of someone else's sacrifice. Counselor Yast was the first to speak. Assuming your translations are correct, what are the current implications? Are these humans still at war? Elder Neth manipulated the holographic display to show David's most recent tattoos. According to these markings, the last major engagement was 6 months ago, something called the Proxima campaign. The symbols suggest it was a defensive action rather than an assault. Defensive against what? Captain Rill asked. Cultists, Neth replied grimly. species that still worship the harbingers and seek their return. Apparently, there are entire civilizations dedicated to resurrecting their dead gods. Council Speaker Thera's patterns cycled through several colors before settling on deep purple. Captain Rill, what is your assessment of this human as a military threat? Based on his equipment and technology? Minimal. Captain Rill's skin flickered with confusion. His ship was primitive by our standards. Simple fusion drive, basic energy weapons. But if these translations are accurate, then this primitive technology is somehow capable of killing immortal beings. Counselor Vren interrupted. Perhaps their weapons are not as primitive as they appear, Elder Neth suggested. The ancient records speak of fire that burns in multiple dimensions. Energy that can disrupt the quantum matrices that allow harbingers to exist partially outside normal space-time. Counselor Beck's patterns flashed with sudden understanding. The anomalous readings from his ship. Our sensors detected energy signatures we could not identify. Precisely, Captain Rill confirmed. We assumed it was sensor malfunction. But if these weapons are designed to affect transdimensional entities, Council Speaker Thera raised her hand for silence. We are speculating beyond our evidence. What we need is confirmation. Direct testimony from the human himself. I have been requesting an interview for 3 days, Elder Neth said. The prisoner has remained silent about the meaning of his markings. Perhaps because he recognizes the implications, Counselor Yast suggested. If humans have been protecting the galaxy in secret, revealing the truth could change everything. It already has changed everything, Elder Neth replied. The question is whether we acknowledge it or continue living in ignorance. Captain Rill activated his personal communication device. Commander Voss, bring the human prisoner to Conference Room 7. Full security escort. Captain, the High Council has not authorized. Council Speaker Thera began. With respect, Speaker, we need answers. And the only source of those answers is currently sitting in a detention cell. The council chamber filled with agitated light patterns as the Etherians debated. Some argued for caution, others for immediate action. But underlying all their discussions was a growing awareness that their understanding of galactic history was fundamentally flawed. 20 minutes later, David Cross sat in restraints across from 12 of the most powerful beings in Etherian space. His expression remained neutral, but Elder Neth noticed how his eyes lingered on specific architectural details, calculating angles, noting exit routes, evaluating threats. The behavior of a professional soldier. Council Speaker Thara addressed David directly. Human, we have translated some of your markings. We know they document military campaigns. What we wish to understand is the nature of your enemies. David remained silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of centuries of hidden war. You want to know about the harbingers? The reaction was immediate. Several counselors' skin patterns flashed to pure white shock. Others dimmed to fearful black. Only Elder Neth maintained his composure. You know that name, David observed. Good, that will make this easier. The harbingers are myth, Counselor Beck protested. Stories from the dark epochs. David's smile held no warmth. Is that what you tell yourselves? That the beings who ruled your species for 2,000 years were just stories? They were not rulers, Council Speaker Thera said firmly. The Lightbringer was a guide. A teacher. Our relationship was symbiotic. Your relationship was slavery, David replied bluntly. The Lightbringer fed on your psychic energy, kept you docile and compliant. The philosophical insights you think you developed independently, they were designed to make you better batteries. The accusation hit the council like a physical blow. Etherians prided themselves on their intellectual achievements. To suggest they were nothing more than livestock was deeply offensive. You lie, Counselor Vren snarled, his patterns flashing angry red. Do I? David gestured toward Elder Neth. Ask your scholar. He has read the old records. He knows what the harbingers really were. All eyes turned to Neth, whose ancient skin flickered with reluctant confirmation. The oldest archives do contain references to energy harvesting. I had assumed they were metaphorical. Nothing about the harbingers was metaphorical, David said. They were parasites, cosmic vampires that fed on entire civilizations. And they are not gone. We have been fighting them for 3,000 years, and they keep coming back. Council Speaker Thara struggled to maintain her composure. Even if we accept your claims, why should we trust you? Why should we believe that your species is any different? David leaned forward despite his restraints. Because we could have taken your world any time in the last 800 years. We knew about your civilization. We have been protecting your shipping lanes, eliminating harbinger cults in your territory, fighting battles in your space that you never even detected. And now? Captain Rill asked quietly. Now one of your patrol ships shot down a reconnaissance vessel on a routine mission, and instead of thanking us for 3 millennia of protection, you locked up the pilot and started interrogating him about military secrets. The truth of David's words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. The Etherians had built their entire sense of identity around their independence and achievements. Learning that they owed everything to another species' sacrifice was devastating. But perhaps, Elder Neth thought as he studied the human's scarred hands, it was also an opportunity. An opportunity to finally understand their place in a galaxy far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. David's cell had become a place of pilgrimage. For 3 days, Etherian scholars, philosophers, and historians had been arriving to study the human who carried fire against gods. Each visitor left with their worldview fundamentally altered. The tattoos that had once seemed like primitive decorations now read like a cosmic history book. Elder Neth sat across from David in the austere interview room, his ancient patterns dim with exhaustion. Your people, how many worlds do they control? Control is the wrong word, David replied. Humans spread across the galaxy not as conquerors but as guardians. We go where the harbingers appear. Sometimes that means establishing permanent bases. Sometimes it means living on generation ships for centuries. And your population? David considered the question. Active military? Maybe 50 million. Civilian populations unknown. We lost centralized record-keeping during the Long War. Some colonies have been isolated for centuries. Neth's skin flickered with amazement. 50 million beings holding the line against cosmic horror for 3,000 years. How do you sustain such a campaign? The resources alone. We take what we need, David said simply. Asteroid mining, energy from dead stars, salvage from harbinger battlefields. We have become very efficient at fighting wars in empty space. The interview room's door chimed and Captain Rill entered with urgency written in his bright yellow patterns. David, we need to discuss something immediately. Our deep space monitors have detected unusual activity in the Kepler sector. David's expression hardened. What kind of activity? Mass communications between previously isolated worlds, religious broadcasts calling for the return of something they call the Void Father. Our xenologists believe it might be a harbinger resurrection cult, David finished grimly. How many worlds involved? At least 40. Possibly more. The broadcasts are spreading exponentially. David closed his eyes and seemed to age 10 years. 40 worlds! That is enough biomass to power a Class 7 resurrection ritual. If they succeed, they can bring back a dead harbinger? Elder Neth asked. Not bring back. Resurrect is more accurate. The harbingers do not truly die. They exist partially outside normal space-time. With enough psychic energy from willing worshippers, a dead harbinger can reconstitute itself. Captain Rill's patterns cycled through several colors. How long do we have? Depends on the cult's organization. If they are coordinated and have prepared the proper rituals, days, maybe hours. The weight of this information settled over the two Etherians like a crushing tide. Elder Neth spoke first. What would happen if they succeed? David met his eyes. The Kepler sector contains 17 inhabited systems. Total population approximately 4 billion. If the Void Father returns, it will consume them all within a year. Then it will spread to neighboring sectors, including ours, Captain Rill realized. Especially yours. The Etherians have strong psychic potential. Your bioluminescent communication makes you ideal energy sources. A resurrected harbinger would target your worlds immediately. Captain Rill's skin went completely white. What can be done? Human fleet assets are already moving toward the Kepler sector, David said. But we are stretched thin. 3 other resurrection attempts are happening simultaneously in distant parts of the galaxy. We may not have enough ships to stop all of them. Elder Neth leaned forward. What do you need from us? Nothing, David replied. This is not your fight. Your people are philosophers, not warriors. The best thing you can do is evacuate your border worlds and hope we succeed. The dismissal stung, but Captain Rill understood the logic. Etherians had no experience with cosmic warfare. Their ships were designed for exploration, not battle. Against entities that could manipulate reality itself, they would be worse than useless. There must be something, Neth began. There is, David interrupted. But you will not like it. Both Etherians waited. The Void Father was bound to this sector by a psychic anchor, a focal point that allowed it to maintain coherence across multiple dimensions. We destroyed the anchor 800 years ago, but the resonance patterns remain. On our homeworld, Captain Rill said quietly. David nodded. Hidden beneath your capital city. The cultists will need access to that anchor point to complete their resurrection ritual. They will come for your world. The implications hit both Etherians simultaneously. Their peaceful civilization was about to become a battlefield in a war they barely understood. But more than that, they were the key to either preventing or enabling cosmic catastrophe. How long before they arrive? Elder Neth asked. Unknown. But once the ritual begins, they will need the anchor within 72 hours. If I were planning this operation, I would already have ships in your system. Captain Rill activated his communication device. Command, this is Captain Rill. Initiate deep space scans of the entire system. Look for cloaked vessels or unusual energy signatures. The response came back within minutes. Captain, we are detecting 17 unidentified vessels on the edge of the system. They appeared 3 hours ago but showed no hostile intent. We assumed they were traitors. David's expression grew grim. Not traitors, cultists. They are already here. 17 ships against our entire defense fleet? Captain Rill tried to sound confident. Captain, those are not ordinary ships. Harbinger cults use vessels modified with transdimensional technology. Reality itself bends around them. Your weapons will be largely ineffective. Elder Neth studied David's face. But human weapons would work. Yes. But the nearest human fleet is 6 days away. The cultists only need 3 days to complete their ritual once they reach the anchor point. Captain Rill stood and began pacing, his patterns flashing with agitation. There has to be something we can do, some way to delay them. Actually, there is, David said slowly, but it requires trusting me completely. Both Etherians looked at him expectantly. The anchor point is hidden, but I know where it is. The cultists will need time to locate it. If we can evacuate the civilian population and turn your capital city into a fortress, we might be able to hold them off until human reinforcements arrive. You want us to release you, Captain Rill realized. I want you to work with me. This is bigger than first contact protocols or territorial disputes. If the Void Father returns, it will not care about Etherian sovereignty. It will simply consume your species. Elder Neth was quiet for a long moment. Captain, our philosophers have debated the nature of moral choice for centuries. This seems like a clear case. The High Council will never approve releasing a hostile alien during a crisis. Then do not ask for approval, David suggested. In 6 hours, those cultist ships will begin their assault. Your people will die by the millions, unless you act now. Captain Rill stared at the human prisoner. Everything about this situation violated military protocol. But the alternative was watching his civilization burn while cosmic horrors fed on the ashes. If I release you, how do I know you will not simply escape? David gestured to his tattoos. Because this is what I do, Captain. For 3,000 years, my people have carried fire against gods. We do not run from fights like this. We run toward them. The communication device chimed again. Captain Rill, the unidentified vessels are moving toward the inner system. They will reach our defensive perimeter in 4 hours. Captain Rill looked at Elder Neth, then back at David. What do you need? My equipment. Access to your city's defensive systems. And someone who knows the underground tunnels beneath your capital. And in return? David's smile was sharp as a blade. I will show your people what it looks like when humans carry fire against gods. Elder Neth's ancient patterns flickered with something that might have been hope. Captain, I believe we are about to witness history. Let us pray we survive to record it. Captain Rill replied as he began entering his authorization codes. In 6 hours, the Etherian homeworld would become a battlefield. And for the first time in their history, they would fight alongside the species that had been protecting them in secret for 8 centuries. The fire carriers were going to war. The Etherian capital city burned, not with conventional fire, but with the twisted flames of reality breaking down. Harbinger cultist ships hung in the sky like metallic tumors, their hull plating shifting between dimensions. Where their weapons struck, buildings simply ceased to exist. David Cross crouched in the ruins of what had been a beautiful crystal plaza, his recovered equipment humming with deadly purpose. The weapon in his hands looked primitive compared to Etherian technology, little more than metal tubes and focusing crystals. But it burned with fire that existed in 11 dimensions. North sector perimeter is collapsing, Captain Rill reported through the comm system. His voice carried the strain of 3 hours of impossible warfare. The entities they summoned are tearing through our defenses. Pull your forces back to the inner ring, David replied. Do not try to fight the shadow constructs directly. Use your energy weapons to illuminate them. Light disrupts their cohesion. Elder Neth's voice crackled through the communication array. David, the evacuation of sub-level 7 is complete. The anchor chamber is secure. For now, David muttered. He checked his equipment one final time. 6-dimensional fusion charges, each one capable of disrupting a Class 7 entity's quantum matrix. Enough to delay the ritual, but not enough to stop it permanently. The real battle would come when the Void Father itself began to manifest. A shadow fell across the plaza, and David looked up to see one of the cultist ships descending. Its hull rippled like liquid metal, and reality warped around it in visible distortions. The beings aboard were no longer entirely real. They had sacrificed their physical forms for power. Captain Rill, I need covering fire on the plaza. Something is coming down. Etherian defense ships moved in formation, their weapons painting the sky with coherent light. The beam struck the cultist vessel and seemed to slow its descent. For a moment, David felt hope. Then the ship's true weapons activated. The world went silent. Color drained from everything as the ship projected a null field, a zone where the basic forces of physics simply stopped working. David watched in horror as 3 Etherian fighters fell from the sky, their engines unable to function in the reality dead zone. But human weapons were different, designed specifically to function where normal physics failed. David raised his rifle and fired. The dimensional fusion beam cut through the null field like it was not there. The energy struck the cultist ship's hull and reality reasserted itself in a violent snap. The vessel crashed into the plaza with the sound of breaking glass. Impossible, Captain Rill breathed. Your weapon functioned in the null field. Human technology assumes nothing about how reality should work, David explained. We have been fighting things that rewrite the laws of physics for 3,000 years. We learned to build tools that work regardless. The wrecked cultist ship split open like a rotten fruit. What emerged was no longer recognizable as any known species. The beings had hollowed themselves out and filled the empty spaces with borrowed power. They moved like liquid shadow and spoke in voices that bypassed the ears to echo directly in the mind. The anchor calls to us, they whispered in unison. The Void Father stirs. Reality will know its master. David activated his second weapon, a device that looked like a simple metal rod. When he triggered it, the air around the shadow beings began to burn with white fire. They screamed as the flames consumed their borrowed power. Fire that burns in multiple dimensions, Elder Neth observed. Fascinating. Less fascinating, more functional, David replied. How much time before the ritual reaches critical phase? According to the readings from the anchor chamber, maybe 20 minutes.
20 minutes.
David checked his remaining equipment. Not enough for a prolonged fight, but possibly enough for what he had in mind.
Captain Rill, I need you to do something that will sound insane.
At this point, nothing sounds insane anymore. I need you to fire your main planetary defense cannon directly at the anchor chamber. The silence on the comm channel stretched for several seconds. David, that will destroy half the city. No, it will not. The anchor exists partially outside normal space. A direct energy strike will disrupt the dimensional barriers. Instead of an explosion, you will get a controlled implosion. And if you are wrong? David smiled grimly. Then we all die. But if I am right, the resulting dimensional collapse will make it impossible for the Void Father to fully manifest. It will buy us time. Another cultist ship was descending toward the plaza. This one was larger, and reality bent so severely around it that David could see the curvature of space-time. Captain, decide quickly. The big ship carries the ritual focus. If it reaches the anchor chamber, firing solution locked, Captain Rill announced. Planetary defense cannon charged. David, I hope you know what you are doing. So do I. The cannon fired. A beam of concentrated energy lanced down from orbit and struck the city's heart. For a moment, David thought he had miscalculated. Then the dimensional barriers around the anchor point collapsed. Reality folded inward like origami made of space and time. The descending cultist ship was caught in the implosion and simply vanished. The shadow beings in the plaza screamed as their connection to the Void Father was severed. But David's victory was short-lived. The dimensional collapse had only delayed the ritual, not stopped it. And now he could feel something vast and terrible stirring in the spaces between stars. David, Elder Neth's voice was tight with fear. The sensors are detecting massive gravitational distortions throughout the system. Something enormous is approaching. Through the smoke and chaos, David saw them. Human ships, not the sleek exploration vessels the Etherians were familiar with, but massive dreadnoughts built for war against gods. Their hulls were scarred from centuries of impossible battles, and they moved with the practiced efficiency of veterans. Admiral Sarah Stone's voice cut through the communication channels. "This is Admiral Stone of the Human Defense Corps. All Etherian forces fall back to defensive positions. We will handle the entity." Captain Rill's relief was evident in his brightening skin patterns. "Admiral, the situation is under control," Stone interrupted. "We have been tracking this cult for 6 months. The Void Father is attempting to manifest, but the dimensional anchor has been disrupted. We can finish this." David watched as the human fleet deployed weapons he had only heard described in tactical briefings. Reality anchors to prevent dimensional manipulation. Quantum disruptors to tear apart trans-dimensional entities. And at the center of the formation, the flagship's primary weapon. A device that could delete sections of space-time itself. The battle that followed lasted only minutes. When something that had once been worshipped as a god tried to claw its way into normal reality, humanity met it with fire and mathematics. The Void Father's partially manifested form was systematically dismantled by weapons designed specifically for killing cosmic horrors. When the firing stopped, the Kepler sector was safe. Admiral Stone materialized in the plaza via transport beam. She was a tall woman with graying hair and eyes that had seen too much. Like David, her arms were covered in tattoos documenting battles against impossible enemies. "Sergeant Cross," she said formally. "Status report. Mission parameters exceeded, Admiral. First contact with the Etherians was successful. They proved capable allies during the crisis." Admiral Stone looked around at the damage to the city. "Capable allies. Yes, I can see that." She turned to Captain Rill. "Captain, I believe we need to have a conversation about the future." Captain Rill's pattern shifted to cautious optimism. "Admiral, what kind of future? One where your people understand what is really happening in this galaxy, where you know about the threats that exist in the darkness, and where, if you choose, you can help us carry fire against gods." Elder Neth stepped forward. "Admiral, we have learned much about your people in the past few days. Your sacrifice, your dedication. We would be honored to assist in any way possible." Admiral Stone smiled. "Elder, the galaxy is vast and dangerous. There are harbingers still sleeping in dead systems, cults working to resurrect their masters, and somewhere out in the deep dark, entities that make the Void Father look like a minor nuisance." She gestured to the human ships hanging in orbit. "For 3,000 years we have fought this war alone. Perhaps it is time for that to change." Captain Rill looked at his damaged city, at the human soldiers who had fought alongside his people, at the tattoos that told stories of impossible victories. "Admiral, what would you need from us?" "Allies, friends. People who understand that freedom is not free. And maybe, if you are willing, new recruits for humanity's oldest profession." "Which is?" Admiral Stone's smile held the same sharp edge as David's. "Carrying fire against gods." As the human fleet began rescue operations and the Etherians started rebuilding their city, David looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, other battles were being fought. Other species were learning the price of freedom. And humanity continued its eternal vigil. The fire carriers would never rest. But perhaps for the first time in 3 millennia, they would not fight alone.